I never expected her to remember my name, let alone the way I take my coffee. No sugar. Lid half on. Always burning my thumb because I'm impatient. It was a Tuesday, the kind that doesn't ask anything of you. I was at the corner laundromat, the one with the broken change machine and the radio that never quite found a station. My clothes went around in slow circles, and I stood there pretending I wasn't counting the minutes. That's when she walked in, balancing a laundry basket on her hip like she'd done it her whole life. Which, I realized, she probably had. "Hi," she said. Just that. Not my name yet. I nodded, because nodding is what I do when I'm not sure what version of myself to offer. She smiled anyway. It wasn't big. It didn't ask for anything back. She chose the machine 2 down from mine. Not next to. Close, but considerate. I noticed because I always notice distance. I watched her hands load the washer. Careful, practiced. She folded a stray sock before putting it in, like it mattered that it went in neat. That stayed with me longer than it should have. "You're Jason, right?" she said, after a minute. I looked up too fast. Yeah. She nodded, satisfied, and wrote her name on the washer with a dry erase marker. Just her first name. I'd known it for years. I'd said it across dinner tables and from the front porch, always with other voices around to hold it in place. Hearing it here, written in blue ink, felt different. Smaller. Like it could slip. We didn't talk much at first. The machines did most of it. Thumping, whirring, stopping abruptly like they'd forgotten something. I checked my phone twice, even though no one texts me on Tuesdays. A half-written message sat in my drafts, still unsent from last week. I closed it without deleting it. Some things feel safer unfinished. She glanced at my phone and then away, polite enough not to ask. "You still working nights?" she said. "Yeah. For now." "For now," she repeated, like she was trying the words out. When the dryer started, we moved closer without deciding to. I handed her a sheet when she ran out. Our fingers didn't touch. That almost felt intentional, even though I knew it wasn't. She laughed at something on the radio, some joke that wasn't that funny, and covered her mouth like she was surprised by the sound of herself. I folded a napkin from the vending machine into a square and then into nothing, just to give my hands something to do. "You okay?" she asked, not looking at me. "Yeah," I said. Then, because silence can feel like a lie, "Just tired." She nodded again. She does that a lot. Like she believes people the first time. When it was time to leave, she carried her basket to the door and paused. I stood there longer than necessary, pretending to check a pocket. She turned back, just a little. "Hey," she said. "If you're around this week. I make too much soup. Always have." I didn't answer right away. I watched the dryer slow to a stop behind her. The radio cut out mid-song. "Yeah," I said finally. "Yeah, maybe." She smiled, smaller this time, and left. That night, my phone buzzed at 9:43. A number I hadn't saved. "It's me," the text said. "Hope that's okay." "Hey," she said. Then, softer, "You came." "Yeah," I said. "You said soup." She smiled and stepped aside. The house smelled like onions and something herbal I couldn't name. Comfort, maybe. Or memory. I took off my shoes without being told. I'd done that here before, years ago, back when her son and I would drop backpacks in the hallway and disappear upstairs. That thought landed heavier than it should have. She poured tea while the soup warmed back up. We sat at the kitchen table, not across from each other, but angled, like we were both trying not to make it feel like an interview. Steam rose between us. She wrapped her hands around her mug and sighed. "I used to hate quiet," she said suddenly. "After my husband died. It felt loud." I didn't respond right away. I let her have the space she'd made. "And now I hate noise," she said, smiling at herself. "Funny how that happens." I nodded, staring into my cup. I thought about my apartment. The TV always on, even when I wasn't watching. I leave things unfinished, I said before I could stop myself. Shows. Messages. Plans. She looked at me then. Really looked. "Because." I shrugged. "Feels like if I don't finish, I don't have to admit how I feel about it." She didn't say anything. She just nodded, that same steady nod, like she was storing the thought somewhere careful. We ate in silence for a while. Not awkward. Just present. She asked about work. I asked about her garden out back. She complained about the neighbor's cat. I told her I liked the quiet street. Each sentence felt like a small step onto something thin, like ice you test with your foot before trusting your weight. At one point, she reached across the table to grab the salt, and her sleeve brushed my wrist. It was nothing. It was everything. I felt it long after she'd pulled away, like warmth you notice only when it's gone. You know, she said lightly. This is probably not a great idea. I laughed, too quick. Soup. This, she said, gesturing vaguely between us. The air felt thicker after that. I thought of her son, my friend. Thought of how easily lines blur when no one's watching. Yeah, I said. Probably. We didn't move. We just sat there, the clock ticking louder than it had any right to. When I stood to leave, she walked me to the door. No rush. On the porch, she hesitated, then reached out and smoothed a crease in my jacket like it had bothered her the whole time. Her hand lingered for half a second too long. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me and chose not to look away. After that night, things didn't change all at once. They tilted. She stopped texting first. Not deliberately. At least that's what I told myself. But enough that I noticed. Enough that I started checking my phone more than I should. Enough that I replayed the way her hand had rested on my jacket like it had weight. When we did see each other, it was smaller, quieter. A wave across the street. A smile held for half a second too long, then released. I started timing my walks so I wouldn't pass her house by accident. Or maybe so I would. I wasn't sure anymore. One afternoon, I went over to return a book she'd lent me. Essays. Dog-eared, underlined. I hadn't finished it. Of course I hadn't. Her car was in the driveway. So was another one. I almost left. But the door was already opening. Hey, she said, surprised again. This time, there was something else in it. Caution. You're early. I can come back, I said immediately. Too fast. No, she said. Then paused. It's fine. Inside, her son, my friend, was sitting at the table, scrolling on his phone, half listening to something on speaker. He looked up. Yo. Hey, I said. My voice sounded normal. That felt like a small victory. She took the book from my hands, her fingers careful not to touch this time. Did you like it? Yeah, I said. Then, honest despite myself, I didn't finish. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Most people don't. We stood there, the three of us, like furniture arranged wrong. I felt suddenly too aware of my body. Where I was standing. How close she wasn't. I left sooner than I meant to. On the porch, she followed me out, stopping just short of the door. I'm sorry, she said quietly. For what? She shook her head. Nothing. Her son called her name from inside. She answered without turning around. That night, she texted. Just once. I need to slow this down. I stared at the words until they blurred. Typed something. Deleted it. Typed again. Okay, I finally sent. A lie small enough to swallow. The slowing didn't make it easier. It made everything sharper. Every accidental brush. Every shared look that stopped short of meaning. One evening, I helped her carry groceries in from the car. The sky was heavy, like it might rain, but hadn't decided yet. She dropped a bag. Apples rolled across the driveway. I crouched to pick them up. When I stood, she was closer than I expected. Too close. Jason, she said. Just my name. Like it was a question. I could see the faint line between her brows. The way her breath caught, just slightly. My hand hovered near her elbow, not touching. We shouldn't, she said. Or maybe she didn't. Maybe I filled that in myself. I know, I said. Neither of us moved. Her gaze dropped to my mouth, then back up. A beat. Another. The world narrowing to the space between us. She stepped back first. Thank you for the help, she said, already turning away. I watched her go inside, the door closing softly behind her. I stood there longer than necessary, holding an apple one hadn't noticed I was still gripping, thinking about how close isn't the same as crossed, and how sometimes that's worse. The night it broke open wasn't dramatic. No raised voices. No rain. Just a walk I hadn't planned on taking. I'd gone out late, telling myself I needed air. The neighborhood was quiet in that way that makes you hear your own footsteps. Halfway down the block, I saw her ahead of me, sitting on the low concrete bench by the small park. The one with the crooked lamppost. She was alone, coat wrapped tight, hands folded like she was holding something fragile. I should have turned back. She looked up before I decided. Hey, she said, surprised but not startled. Like she'd been expecting interruption from someone, just not sure who. I sat at the far end of the bench. Space between us. Respectable. Cowardly. We watched a dog pull its owner down the sidewalk. Neither of us laughed. You've been busy, I said. It came out flatter than I meant. She nodded. Trying to be. With everything? She knew what I meant. That was the problem. Jason, she said, and stopped. Took a breath. Let it out slow. This isn't fair to you. Something in my chest tightened. Jealousy, maybe. Or fear dressed up as it. I pictured her days filled with people who fit more easily into her life. People who didn't require caution. I didn't ask for fair, I said, then immediately wished I hadn't. She turned to face me fully. The lamppost light caught the lines around her eyes. Not hiding them. Not apologizing for them. I think about you more than I should, she said. Quiet. Steady. Like she was admitting a bad habit. My throat went dry. I stared at my hands. Open. Empty. I don't know what you want from me, I said. Not accusing. Just tired. She laughed softly. Not amused. Neither do I. A pause. That's what scares me. We sat there, the space between us feeling suddenly artificial. Like a rule that had outlived its usefulness. I saw you, I said before I could stop myself. The other day. With him. She didn't ask who. She didn't need to. He's just someone, she said. Someone simple. And I'm not. She looked at me then. Really looked. You're not simple, she said. You're careful. That's different. I swallowed. Careful had never sounded so close to dangerous. Her hand moved on the bench. Not touching me. Just closer. I could feel the heat of it. If we keep doing this, she said, something will break. And it won't be loud. It'll just quietly stop working. I nodded, even though every part of me wanted to close the distance. So what do we do? She didn't answer right away. The silence stretched. Comfortable. Terrifying. She leaned in, just slightly. Close enough that I could smell her shampoo. Close enough that my body made decisions my head was still arguing with. Her voice dropped. Tell me what you're hoping for, she said. Not demanding. Just asking. I opened my mouth. And there it was, the edge. The moment before you step or don't. The question hanging between us, unanswered. After that night, she disappeared in small ways that felt intentional. No more bench walks. No porch light flicking on when I passed. When I texted, she replied hours later. Kind, measured, like she was choosing each word from a list she'd already approved. I told myself this was what slowing down looked like. Adult. Responsible. Still, I stopped showing up where I might see her. Took a different route home. Let my laundry pile up instead of risking the laundromat. Avoidance masquerading as dignity. Then, one afternoon, she called. Not a text. A call. I stood in my kitchen, phone buzzing on the counter, watching it like it might do something on its own. When I answered, her voice sounded farther away. Not physically. Emotionally. I need to tell you something, she said. I sat on the edge of the counter. Okay. There's someone from my past, she said. A pause. Before my husband died. We were complicated. He reached out. I pictured a face I didn't know. Someone with shared history. Someone whose place in her life didn't need explaining. And I said yes to dinner. She exhaled. I didn't want you to hear it somewhere else. My first reaction was relief. At least there was a reason. The second was something sharper. Jealousy, sure. But also shame for feeling it. Are you telling me this to be honest? I asked. Or to make it easier to stop? Another pause. Longer. Both. We didn't talk much after that. She said she hoped I understood. I said I did. Another small lie, neatly folded. Days passed. Then a week. I caught myself checking the bench at the park when I drove by at night. It stayed empty. The lamppost buzzed like it always had. Indifferent. One evening, I almost knocked on her door. I stood there, fist raised, thinking about all the versions of myself that could walk away or step forward. I thought about her son inside. About lines once crossed, never going back to being lines. I lowered my hand. Later, she texted again. Dinner went fine. Nothing else. No punctuation that invited a response. I typed 3 different replies. Deleted them all. I started noticing how much of my life I'd rearranged around the possibility of her. How the quiet had changed shape. How loneliness can feel less lonely when it's shared, even from a distance. She avoided me after that. Not rudely. Carefully. A smile from the car. A nod across the street. The kind of politeness that keeps everyone safe and no one satisfied. I went back to the park one night, sat on the bench alone. The concrete was cold through my jeans. I imagined her there, hands folded, coat pulled tight. Imagined telling her it was okay to choose something simpler. Imagined her believing me. My phone buzzed. A message half-typed, still unsent, stared back at me. I didn't add to it. I didn't erase it. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. I left the bench empty when I went home. I didn't plan on seeing her again. That's the lie I tell myself when something feels inevitable. It was early evening, the sky still holding on to a little light, when I noticed the porch light on for the first time in weeks. I slowed without meaning to, stopped without deciding. By the time I realized where I was already standing at the bottom of her steps. I didn't knock right away. The door opened anyway. She looked tired, not undone, just worn at the edges, like someone who'd been holding herself together all day and had finally set something down. When she saw me, her shoulders dropped a fraction. "Hi," she said. "Hi." We stood there, the doorway doing most of the talking for us. Then she stepped aside. Not an invitation exactly, more like an allowance. The kitchen light was warm, familiar. The same table, the same clock ticking a little too loudly. She gestured for me to sit. I didn't. Neither did she. "I didn't mean to disappear," she said. Straight to it. No easing in. I thought distance would fix things. And did it? I asked. She smiled faintly. No, silence settled between us. Not heavy, just honest. "I went to dinner," she said. "I told you that. What I didn't say is that halfway through, I realized I was measuring him against you. And I hated myself for it. That landed somewhere low in my chest. I leaned back against the counter, crossing my arms like that might keep everything from spilling out. "I don't want to be something that makes your life harder." "You're not," she said quickly, then paused. Softer. "You're something that reminds me I'm still here." I nodded. I understood that feeling too well. "That doesn't mean we should keep doing this." She watched me carefully. "Is that what you want?" The question sat there, unadorned. I thought about the versions of myself I'd rehearsed, braver, bolder, willing to risk the fallout. Thought about her son, about mornings after decisions you can't unmake. "No," I said, honest, "but I think it's what I can live with." Her breath caught, just a little. She reached for the back of a chair, steadying herself. "I'm glad you came," she said. "I needed to know this wasn't all in my head." "It wasn't," I said. "It mattered." We stood closer now, not touching. The space between us felt intentional, like something we were both protecting. "I don't regret it," she said. "Me neither." Another pause. Then she stepped forward and rested her forehead briefly against my shoulder. Not a hug, not a goodbye, just contact. I felt the weight of it, the restraint. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright but dry. "Okay," she said. Not a question exactly. "Okay," I said. She smiled. Small, real. I let myself out. The porch light stayed on behind me as I walked away. Time didn't rush to fix anything. It never does. It moved the way it always had. Uneven, slightly indifferent, but somewhere along the way, it softened the sharpest edges. Weeks passed, then months. Summer leaned into fall without asking permission. We didn't see each other for a while after that night. Not dramatically, just space. The kind that lets things settle instead of explode. My routines changed first. I started finishing things, books, messages, meals eaten at the table instead of standing by the sink. I still drank my coffee black. Still burned my thumb sometimes. Some habits don't need correcting. The bench at the park became part of my morning route. Not to wait, just to sit, to exist. At 8:47 a.m., the light hit the concrete a certain way, warming one side, leaving the other cool. I noticed details I'd been too distracted to see before. She came back into my life quietly. Of course she did. It started with a nod at the grocery store, a shared look over apples stacked too high, then a short conversation. Neutral, polite, safe. She told me her son was moving out of state. I told her I'd switch to day shifts. "Good for you," she said, and meant it. The first time we had tea again, it was months later. Afternoon. Sunlight through her kitchen window. No tension humming under the table. Just two people catching up like they'd earned the right to be there. "I still make too much," she said, pouring. "I still don't finish things," I replied. She smiled. "You're better at it." We didn't talk about the past right away. When we finally did, it wasn't heavy, just honest. The kind of honesty that comes after you've both survived the not knowing. "We were careful," she said once, fingers wrapped around her mug. "Even when we weren't." "That's why it worked," I said. Life wasn't suddenly simple. It didn't turn cinematic. There were awkward overlaps, people who knew us before, questions that lingered too long. But there was also something solid now. Chosen. Clear. Sometimes we walked to the park together. Sat on the bench. Sometimes we didn't talk at all. Other times we laughed about nothing important. She still folded napkins without realizing it. I still washed her hands. Mornings became my favorite. The way she moved around the kitchen, barefoot, focused. The way she remembered my coffee without asking. Black. Lid half on. She teased me about it once. You're impossible, she said. Consistent, I corrected. One evening, as the porch light clicked on behind us, she reached for my hand. Not hesitant. Not testing. Just there. I'm glad we didn't rush, she said. Me too, I said, and meant it in every version of myself that had waited. Later, when things were quiet and the day had finally let go of us, she leaned her head against my shoulder and sighed. Not tired. Content. Some loves don't arrive loudly. They settle in, the way warmth does, slow, unnoticed, until one day you realize you're no longer cold. If this story stayed with you, tell me, what kind of quiet, real love story should we tell next?